Page 23. Counterstroke. 1. Day began to dawn. Fantine had a feverish and sleepless night, yet full of happy visions she fell asleep at daybreak. The sister who had watched over her took advantage of this slumber to go and prepare a new potion of quinine. The good sister had been for a few moments in the laboratory of the infirmary, bending over her vials and drugs, looking at them very closely on account of the mist which the dawn casts over all objects, when suddenly she turned her head and uttered a faint cry. Monsieur Madeleine stood before her. He had just come in silently. "You, Monsieur the Mayor," she exclaimed. "How is the poor woman?" He answered in a low voice. "Better just now. We have been very anxious indeed." She explained that Fantine had been very ill the night before, but it was now better because she believed that the mayor had gone to Montfermeil for her child. The sister dared not question the mayor, but she saw clearly from his manner that he had not come from that place. "That is well," said he. You did right not to deceive her." "Yes," returned the sister, "but now, Monsieur le Maire, when she sees that you are without her child, what shall we tell her?" He reflected for a moment, then said, "God will inspire us." "But we cannot tell her a lie," murmured the sister in a smothered tone. The broad daylight streamed into the room and lighted upon the face of Monsieur Madeleine. The sister happened to raise her eyes. "Oh, God, monsieur," she exclaimed, "what has befallen you? Your hair is all white." "White?" said he. She had no mirror. She rummaged in a case of instruments and found a little glass, which the physician of the infirmary used to discover whether the breath had left the body of a patient. Monsieur Madeleine took the glass, looked at his hair in it, and said, "Indeed." He spoke the word with indifference, as if thinking of something else. The sister felt chilled by an unknown something of which she caught a glimpse in all of this. He made a few remarks about the door that shut with difficulty, the noise which might awaken the sick woman, then entered the chamber of Fantine, approached her bed and opened the curtains. She was sleeping. Her breath came from her chest with that tragic sound which is peculiar to those diseases which rends the heart of unhappy mothers watching the slumbers of their fated children. But this labored respiration scarcely disturbed the ineffable serenity which overshadowed her countenance and transfigured her in her sleep. Her pallor became whiteness, and her cheeks were glowing. Her long, fair eyelashes, the only beauty left to her of her maidenhood and youth, quivered as they lay closed upon her cheek. Her whole person trembled as if the fluttering of wings which were felt but could not be seen, and which seemed about to enfold and bear her away. To see her thus, no one could have believed that her life was despaired of. She looked more as if about to soar away than to die. The stem, when the hand is outstretched to pluck the flower, quivers, and seems at once to shrink back and present itself. The human body has something of this trepidation at the moment when the mysterious fingers of death are about to gather the soul. Monsieur Madeleine remained for some time motionless near the bed, looking by turns at the patient and the crucifix, as he had done 2 months before on the day when he came for the first time to see her in this asylum. They were still there, both in the same attitude, she sleeping, he praying. Only now, after these 2 months had rolled away, her hair was gray, and his was white. The sister had not entered with him. He stood by the bed with his fingers on his lips, as if there was someone in the room to silence, and she opened her eyes and saw him, and said tranquilly with a smile, "And Cosette?" Page 125. 2. She did not start with surprise or joy. She was joy itself. The simple question, "And Cosette?" was asked with such deep faith, with so much certainty, and so complete an absence of disquiet or doubt, that he could find no word in reply. She continued, "I knew that you were there. I was asleep, but I saw you. I have seen you for a long time. I have followed you with my eyes the whole night. You were in a halo of glory, and all manner of celestial forms were hovering around you." He raised his eyes toward the crucifix. "But tell me, where is Cosette?" she resumed. "Why not put her on my bed that I might see her the instant I awoke?" He answered something mechanically, which he could never afterward recall. Happily the physician had come and had been apprised of this. He came to the aid of Monsieur Madeleine. "My child," said he, "be calm. Your daughter is here." The eyes of Fantine beamed with joy and lighted up her whole countenance. She clasped her hands with an expression full of the most violent and most gentle entreaty. "Oh," she exclaimed, "bring her to me." The touching illusion of the mother, Cosette was still to her a little child to be carried in the arms. "Not yet," continued the physician. "Not at this moment. You have some fever still. The sight of your child will agitate you and make you worse. We must cure you first." Monsieur Madeleine was sitting in a chair by the side of the bed. She turned toward him and made visible efforts to appear calm, and very good, as she said in the weakness of her disease, which resembles childhood, so that seeing her so peaceful, there should be no objection to bringing her Cosette. Nevertheless, although restraining herself, she could not help addressing 1,000 questions to Monsieur Madeleine. "Did you have a pleasant journey, Monsieur le Maire?" "Oh, how good you have been to go for her. Tell me only, how is she? Did she bear the journey well? Ah, she will not know me. In all this time she has forgotten me. Poor kitten. Children have no memory. They are like birds. Today they see one thing and tomorrow another, and remember nothing. Tell me only, were her clothes clean? Did those Thénardiers keep her neat? How did they feed her? Oh, I want to see her, Monsieur le Maire. Did you think her pretty? Is not my daughter beautiful? You must have been very cold in diligence. Could they not bring her here for one little moment? They might have to take her away immediately. Say, you are master here. Are you willing?" He took her hand. "Cosette is beautiful," said he. "Cosette is well. You shall see her soon. But be quiet. You talk too fast, and then you throw your arms out of bed, which makes you cough." In fact, coughing fits interrupted Fantine at almost every word. Monsieur Madeleine still held her hand and looked at her with anxiety. It was evident that he had come to tell her things before which his mind now hesitated. The physician had made his visit and retired. The sister alone remained with them. But in the midst of the silence, Fantine cried out, "I hear her! Oh, darling, I hear her!" There was a child playing in the court, the child of the portress or some workwoman. It was one of those chances which are always met with, and which always seem to take part in the mysterious representation of tragic events. The child, which was a little girl, was running up and down to keep herself warm, singing and laughing in a loud voice. Alas, with what are not the plays of children mingled? Fantine had heard this little child singing. "Oh," said she, "it is my Cosette. I know her voice." The child departed, as she had come, with her voice, and the voice died away. Fantine listened for some time. A shadow came over her face, and Monsieur Madeleine heard her whisper, "How wicked it is of that doctor not to let me see my child. That man has a bad face." But yet her happy train of thought returned. With her head on the pillow, she continued to talk to herself. "How happy we shall be. We will have a little garden in the first place. Monsieur Madeleine has promised it to me. My child will play in the garden. She must know her letters now. I will teach her how to spell. She will chase the butterflies in the grass, and I will watch her. Then there will be her first communion. Ah, when will her first communion be?" She began to count on her fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. She is 7 years old. In 5 years she will have a white veil and open-work stockings, and will look like a little lady. Ah, my good sister, you do not know how foolish I am. Here I am thinking of my own child's first communion. And she began to laugh. He had let go of the hand of Fantine. He listened to the words as one listens to the wind that blows, his eyes on the ground and his mind plunged into unfathomable reflections. Suddenly she ceased speaking and raised her head mechanically. Fantine had become appalling. She did not speak, she did not breathe. She half raised herself in the bed. Covering fell from her emaciated shoulders. Her countenance, radiant a moment before, became livid, and her eyes, dilated with terror, seemed to fasten on something before her at the other end of the room. "Good God!" exclaimed he. "What is the matter, Fantine?" She did not answer. She did not take her eyes from the object which seemed to see, but touched his arm with one hand, and the other made a sign to him to look behind him. He turned and saw Javert. Page 128. 3. Let us see what happened. The half-hour after midnight was striking when Monsieur Madeleine left the hall of Arras Assizes and returned to his inn just in time to take the mail coach in which he had retained his seat. A little before 6 in the morning he reached M, where his first care had been to post a letter to Monsieur Lafayette, and then go to the infirmary and visit Fantine. Immediately upon the discharge of Champmathieu, the prosecuting attorney closeted himself with the judge. The subject of their conference was of the necessity of the arrest of the person of Monsieur le Maire of M. The order of arrest was therefore granted. The prosecuting attorney sent it to M. by a courier at full speed to the police inspector, Javert. It will be remembered that Javert had returned to M. immediately after giving his testimony. Javert was just rising when the courier brought him the warrant and an order of arrest. The courier was himself a policeman and an intelligent man, who in 3 words acquainted Javert with what had happened at Arras. The order of arrest signed by the prosecuting attorney was couched in these 3 terms: Inspector Javert will seize the body of Sieur Madeleine, mayor of M. who has this day been identified in court as a discharged convict, Jean Valjean. Javert became unostentatiously and had taken a corporal and 4 soldiers from the station house nearby and left the soldiers in the court. Had been shown to Fantine's chamber by the portress without suspicion, accustomed as she was to see armed men asking for the mayor. On reaching the room of Fantine, Javert turned the key, pushed open the door with the gentleness of a sick nurse or a police spy, and entered. Properly speaking, he did not enter. He remained standing in the half-open door, his hat in his hand and his left hand in his overcoat, which was unbuttoned to the chin. In the bend of his elbow might have been seen the leaden head of his enormous cane, which disappeared behind him. He remained thus for nearly a minute, unperceived. Suddenly Fantine raised her eyes, saw him, and caused Monsieur Madeleine to turn around. At the moment when the glance of Madeleine encountered that of Javert, without stirring, without moving, without approaching, became terrible. No human being can ever be so appalling as joy. It was the face of a demon who had again found his victim. The certainty that he had caught Jean Valjean at last brought forth upon his countenance all that was in his soul. The deformity of triumph spread over his narrow forehead. It was the fullest development of horror that a gratified face can show. Javert was at this moment in heaven. Without clearly defining his own features, his own feelings, yet notwithstanding that confused intuition of his necessity and his success, he, Javert, personified justice, light, and truth in their celestial function as destroyers of evil. He was surrounded and supported by infinite depths of authority, reason, precedent, legal conscience, and the vengeance of the law. All the stars in the firmament. He protected order. He hurled forth the thunder of the law. He avenged society. He lent aid to the absolute. He stood erect in a halo of glory. There was in his victory a reminder of defiance and of combat, standing haughty, resplendent. He displayed in full glory the superhuman beastliness of a ferocious archangel, the fearful shadow of the deed which he was accomplishing, made visible in his clenched fist the uncertain flashes of the social sword, happy and indignant. He had set his heel on the crime, vice, rebellion, perdition, and hell. He was radiant, exterminating, smiling. There was an incontestable grandeur to this monstrous Saint Michael. Javert, though hideous, was not ignoble. Propriety, sincerity, candor, conviction, the idea of duty, are things which mistaken may become hideous, but which, even though hideous, remain great. Their majesty, peculiar to the human conscience, continues in all their horror. They are virtues with a single vice, error. The pitiless, sincere joy of a fanatic in the air of atrocity preserves in an indescribably mournful radiance which inspires us with veneration. Without suspecting it, Javert, in his fear-inspiring happiness, was pitiable. Like every ignorant man who wins a triumph, nothing could be more painful and terrible than his face, which revealed what may call all the evil of good. Page 130. 4. Fantine had not seen Javert since the day the mayor had wrested her from him. Her sick brain accounted for nothing, only she was sure that he had come for her. She could not endure his hideous face. She felt that if she were dying, she hid her face with both hands and shrieked in an anguish, "Monsieur Madeleine, save me!" Jean Valjean, we shall call him by no other name, henceforth had risen. He said to Fantine in his gentlest and calmest tone, "Be composed. It is not for you that he comes." He then turned to Javert and said, "I know what you want." Javert answered, "Hurry along." While speaking thus, he did not stir a step, but cast upon Jean Valjean a look like a noose, from which he was accustomed to draw the wretched to him by force. It was the same look which Fantine had felt penetrate to the very marrow of her bones 2 months before. At the exclamation of Javert, Fantine had opened her eyes again, but the mayor was there. What could she fear? Javert advanced to the middle of the chamber, exclaiming, "Hey there, are you coming?" The unhappy woman looked around her. There was no one but the man and the mayor. To whom could this contemptuous and familiarity be addressed? To herself alone she shuddered. Then she saw a mysterious thing, so mysterious that its like had never appeared to her in the darkest delirium of fever. She saw the spy Javert seize Monsieur le Maire by the collar. She saw Monsieur le Maire bow his head. The world seemed vanishing before her sight. Javert, in fact, had taken Jean Valjean by the collar. Javert burst into a horrid laugh, displaying all his teeth. "There is no Monsieur le Maire in here any longer," said he. Jean Valjean did not attempt to disturb the hand which grasped the collar of his coat. He said, "Javert." Javert interrupted him. "Call me Monsieur the Inspector." "Monsieur," continued Jean Valjean, "I would like to speak a word with you in private." "Aloud. Speak aloud," said Javert. "People, speak aloud to me." Jean Valjean went on, lowering his voice. "It is a request that I have to make of you. I tell you to speak aloud, but this should not be heard by anyone but yourself." What is that to me? I will not listen." Jean Valjean turned to him and said rapidly and in a very low tone, "Give me 3 days. 3 days to go for the child of this unhappy woman." Page 132. "Are you laughing at me?" cried Javert. "Hey, I did not think you so stupid. You asked for 3 days to get away and tell me that you are going for this girl's child? Ha! Ha! That's good. That is good." Fantine shivered. "My child," she exclaimed. "Going for my child? Then she is not here. Sister, tell me, where is Cosette? I want my child. Monsieur Madeleine, Monsieur le Maire." Javert stamped his foot. "There is the other now. Hold your tongue, hussy. Miserable country, where the galley slaves are magistrates and women of the town are nursed like countesses. Ah, but this will be changed. It was time." He gazed steadily at Fantine, and added, grasping anew the cravat, shirt, and coat collar of Jean Valjean, "I tell you that there is no Monsieur Madeleine, and that there is no Monsieur le Maire. There is a robber, there is a brigand, and there is a convict called Jean Valjean, and I have got him. That is what there is." Fantine started upright. Supporting herself by her rigid arms and hands, she looked at Jean Valjean, then at Javert, and then at the nun. She opened her mouth as if to speak. A rattle came from her throat. Her teeth struck together. She stretched out her arms in anguish, convulsively opening her hands and groping about her like one who is drowning. She sank suddenly back upon the pillow. Her head struck the head of the bed and fell forward on her breast. The mouth gaping, the eyes open and glazed. She was dead. Jean Valjean put his hand on that of Javert, which held him, and opened it as he would have opened the hand of a child. Then he said, "You have killed this woman." "Have done with this," cried Javert, furious. "I am not here to listen to sermons, save all that the guard is below. Come right along, or the handcuffs." There stood in a corner of the room an old iron bedstead in a dilapidated condition, which the sisters used as a camp bed. When they watched Jean Valjean, went to the bed, wrenched out the rickety head-bar, a thing easy for muscles like his. In the twinkling of an eye, and with the bar in his clenched fist, looked at Javert. Javert recoiled toward the door. Jean Valjean, his iron bar in hand, walked slowly toward the bed of Fantine. On reaching it, he turned, and said to Javert in a voice that could scarcely be heard, "I advise you not to disturb me now. Nothing is more certain than that." Javert trembled. He had an idea of calling the guard, but Jean Valjean might profit by his absence to escape. He remained therefore, grasped the bottom of his cane, and leaned against the framework of the door without taking his eyes from Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean rested his elbow upon the post and his head upon his hand. He gazed at Fantine, stretched motionless before him. He remained thus, mute and absorbed, evidently lost to everything of his life. His countenance and attitude bespoke nothing but inexpressible pity. At a few moments' reverie, he bent down to Fantine and addressed her in a whisper. What did he say? What could this condemned man say to this dead woman? What were these words? They were heard by none on earth. Did the dead woman hear them? There are touching illusions which perhaps are sublime realities. One thing is beyond doubt. The sister, the only witness of what passed, has often related that at that moment, when Jean Valjean whispered in the ear of Fantine, she distinctly saw an ineffable smile beam upon those pale lips, and those dim eyes full of the wonders of the tomb. Jean Valjean took Fantine's head in his hands, and arranged it on the pillow as a mother would have done for her child, then fastened the string of her nightdress, and replaced her hair beneath her cap. This done, he closed her eyes. The face of Fantine at this instant seemed strangely illumined. Death is the entrance into the great light. Fantine's hand hung over the side of the bed. Jean Valjean knelt before this hand, raised it gently, and kissed it. Then he rose and turned to Javert, said, "Now I am at your disposal." Fantine was buried in the common grave of the cemetery, which is for everybody and for all, and in which the poor are lost. Happily, God knows where to find the soul. Fantine was laid away in the darkness with bodies which had no name. She suffered the promiscuity of dust. She was thrown into the public pit. Her tomb was like her bed.